Hi, Jed from Cook Culture. I'm here with my son Taylor and my daughter Chloe, who's filming at the moment. We're making some food for lunch this week. School's starting on Monday, so we're making a large batch of pasta that we can have in the fridge and we can reheat. We're making what's called cavatelli, or a version of cavatelli. We're doing a gluten-free version, so we're going to be using buckwheat flour and probably either an oat flour or an almond flour. And we're going to use flax as the binder and make a nice little pasta dough. And we're going to show you how to do that. And then we're going to make the cavatelli. That's a really, really fun thing to do with kids. You can just use a fork, or you can use a little gnocchi paddle that I'll show you what that is. And they're just rolling them out by hand, and you put them onto a sheet pan and boil them just like pasta. So what we're also doing is roasting off potatoes, carrots, and beets. So we're going to prepare all the carrots and beets. We're going to get these guys all peeled, cut them into probably half-inch chunks, put them on the sheet pan, and roast them in the oven for probably around 45 minutes or so until they start to sweeten and caramelize. And those will be the base of the pasta. It's going to be a pasta with caramelized veggies. And we're doing a tamari cashew cream, and we've got some cashews that are soaking.
I don't want that.
And my son doesn't love it, so I'll do something else for him. But my daughter and myself and my wife love cashew cream with it. And so we're going to do a bunch of quite boring and tedious prep right now, and then we'll get back to you here as soon as we have some sheet pans ready to go into the oven. Okay, we've prepped the veggies, and now my daughter, who was doing the filming before, Chloe, and my son Taylor are both going to show us how to cut using an extremely sharp knife. My son has a little bit of a smaller prep knife, a 5-inch knife, and my daughter's using a 7-inch santoku. So she's going to first show you how to hold the knife, and this is called a pinch grip. So she has the blade actually in her hand. There's no bolster on this knife, as you can see, but she's holding on to the blade and the handle, so where it joins. That's the most comfortable place to hold the Japanese knife. So now using her claw, this is putting her fingers with her nice long fingernails into the beet, and she's going to start chopping, slicing, and say my son is going to be doing the same thing over here. He's not doing the claw as he probably should be, so it's good to make sure that those nails are dug into whatever that you're using. And chopping, here we're just chopping into whatever shape these guys want to eat. So whatever their kind of edible shape is. Nothing particular in size, just if they're like, yeah, that's the size that I want to put into my mouth once it's roasted. Once these are roasted in the oven, they will also shrink. Yeah, they will shrink. So you can make them, you can make them just a little bit larger.
Okay.
And then they're all going to go into the bowl. We're going to put in a little bit of olive oil, some garlic, and some salt. That's all going to go. We're going to mix that all together. Once the potato, the beet, and the carrots are all chopped about that size, they're going to go on the sheet pan and then go into the oven for maybe up to 45 minutes at 375 degrees, just as they start to caramelize. You want to start to make them sweet. It's going to add some flavor. There's a lot of sugar in these, of course, natural sugar, but it really starts to come out as they start to brown in the oven. So we will continue chopping. So as we continue doing the prep, the bowl is getting nice and full, but I'm starting to get prepared on doing the flour. So we've decided that we're going to do an oat flour, and I've got buckwheat flour here, but we're going to do one secret ingredient that is really going to help bind all of this together. Being that we have no gluten in this, we're doing this as a gluten-free flour. We've found in our family that using things that don't have gluten in it just work better for us all, specifically about recovery and inflammation. It's just how we roll, and so everything we do doesn't have gluten. We've found some really great success using some other flours, some really tremendous flavor. A lot of times we'll use chickpea, so we'll do chickpea in this recipe quite often also. But the secret ingredient is flaxseed. So I'm gonna grind up this flaxseed here, and then once I've ground out probably around 3 tablespoons of flaxseed, I'm gonna mix it with about a half a cup of water. And that's going to soak for about 10 minutes and become a sticky mass, and that's going to be the binder that's gonna go into the flour. Okay, so all the prep is all done. They've done an amazing job with their chopping. And we're now going to put in the garlic. My son's gonna put in some olive oil while my daughter's putting in some salt. Then it's gonna get mixed up. So we're gonna put in 3 teaspoons. So not a huge amount of salt. And my son only used a small amount of olive oil. You don't need, nope, I think you used just perfect amount. You really don't need to drench it. A tiny little bit of olive oil to cover all of the veggies is all you need. With olive oil, really what we're doing is just adding empty calories. It does add a nice flavor and a bit of a texture in the browning. But more isn't necessarily better when it comes to olive oil. I know that many will disagree with me on that, but when it comes from a health perspective, this is empty calories. Yummy, but empty calories. This is nutritious, nutrient-dense, yummy food. So more of this, less of this. So mixing this up, and we're going to take those and put them half and half onto the sheet pans, and then they're going to go into the oven.
I think you can pick it up with your hand.
So sometimes it's easier to do things like this instead of dumping everything, because what could happen, especially when you're a bit younger and don't have quite the same amount of strength, all of a sudden you've got everything onto the sheet pan. We've learned these little lessons, so my daughter's doing the way that makes her comfortable to do this, and she's laying them out perfectly. So nice coverage, garlic, nice sheen from the oil. And the moisture, of course.
I'm gonna spread it out. Oh wow, there's a lot of olive oil.
There we go. Okay, and now these are gonna go into a preheated 375 degree oven. So what my daughter's gonna do to be safe is she's gonna go over and open the oven first. She'll probably wash her hands. And then she'll open the oven and make sure that it's wide open. And then she'll take 1 sheet pan at a time and put them into the oven. So wonderfully organized by my son. Okay, so we will bake those off in there for about 45 minutes but also watching them as it goes. If they start to brown, you'll see the browning on the sheet pan, and they'll just start to caramelize just so, and then they'll be perfect. We're gonna move on to making the pasta dough now. So as I was saying earlier, we have buckwheat flour, we have oat flour, and this here is our flax and water, so ground flax and water. It's really nice and gelatinous, but not gluten. So we're gonna start with about a cup of buckwheat flour, maybe a cup and actually let's do a cup and a half. This combination can go many different ways. It really is a personal preference. We've decided on oat, which is kind of an interesting flavor to add. Buckwheat is pretty neutral. Oat is got a flavor of oat, so it's kind of like the taste of maybe porridge, if you would think, or a cookie. But it's got a really nice smell to it, and so we decided that this would be something that would be tasty to try the mix of in the pasta. We haven't tried this combination before, but we're going to give it a shot and see what happens. Can you pass the salt down, please, Tay? So we're going to add a bit of salt in here. I'm mixing up the two flours together.
Can I put it in?
Yeah, put in 1 scoop of salt, please. Awesome. So just a little bit of salt. We will also salt the water as we're cooking the pasta. But we're going to get that mixed up. Then we've got about 3/4 of a cup of water, I guess, here to the 3 tablespoons. So we're going to get that in. It won't be enough altogether, but it's a good way to start. And then I'm going to come over to the sink and adding more water. Every flour absorbs a certain amount of moisture. So what I do is probably add around 2 or 3 tablespoons of water at a time until I start to see it come together. And it's kind of like making a dough for muffins. You've got wetness and dry together, and it's a nice combination of exactly where the moisture and the wet is going to be. So this looks quite dry, but there's actually quite a lot of moisture trapped inside the dough right now, and there's dryness on the outside. So as I start to, when I take this over to the counter over here, and I start to mix this up, or knead this, I will find that it's actually quite moist, and I'm going to quite quickly need to add some flour back in. So I'll use some more buckwheat flour, and I want to get a nice combination of moisture, but I don't want it like overly sticky on my hands. I want it to be just dry, but still soft and springy. So can you grab me a bench scraper, please, Tay, out of the 3rd drawer down on the right-hand side? So you want to start using your bench scraper here, or a dough scraper, to cleaning what you're trying to manage. Other one over, other side, left-hand side, babe. Thank you. I may have said right.
You said right.
Thank you. All right, so just using that to clean your dough off the wood, if you're using wood, or if you're using, a really nice surface also for making pasta is a marble stone. So if you have like a pastry making stone, it works really well. I find this type of wood that we use for chopping on, that's oiled, works really well for not sticking. So we want to knead this dough for a few minutes. The dough doesn't have any gluten in it, so it doesn't really need to be over kneaded, and I want it to be soft and springy.
Can I try?
Yeah, you can go for it. So it's got a little bit of elasticity to it, which is awesome. That's what the flax is doing inside of it. If it didn't have the flax as a binder, it would not have this sort of elasticity to it. It just really wouldn't do that. And it would just kind of come apart really, really easily. This works really, really well for having the elasticity or the spongy springiness. And this is turned into a good amount of pasta. We are feeding 6 people today, plus all the veg that we've done. So we've got the veggies in the oven for the next probably half an hour. So it gives us lots of time to start to roll this out. So we're now gonna cut this into some pieces, and we're then gonna make it into smaller pieces and get right down into some like pencil size, maybe a bit bigger than a pencil shape, and cut it into the shapes that we need to roll it out. So we'll show you that next.
No.
Okay, so what's going on here now is that we've taken the dough, cut it into probably half cup size shapes, and then started to roll them out into these kind of snake style or snake looking pieces of dough. And this is where the fun is for the kids. Like, all kids love this. These guys are fairly well practiced at this, so they make it look a little bit easy. It's not super easy to start with. It takes a while to kind of get this right. But it's super fun, and you can't really go wrong at all. Whatever the shapes end up being, they're edible and they're tasty. Once they're cooked off, they're great. They go into the whole finished product and they're tremendous. So what happens now is that we've got little pieces that are chopped off.
Like that?
Maybe a tiny bit smaller than that.
The 9?
Yeah, just a little bit smaller, just a tiny bit smaller. You find that yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, absolutely perfect.
I'm gonna be here for a while.
So they're kind of like a thumb sized. And
Thumb size?
at the end of your thumb. Yeah,
Oh.
end of your thumb. Yeah, exactly. And so you can use a knife for this. We find that using a bench scraper is the easiest. It doesn't need to be super sharp. And they're easy to hold. And you can move your dough around with them. If the dough is of a really nice texture when it's finished and not too wet, they won't be too sticky. However, what we do want to do to make sure they don't stick is you've got buckwheat flour, and you just dust a little bit of buckwheat flour or whatever flour you're using over top. And they're going to then all transition or be transported over to a jelly roll sheet or a sheet pan when they're done. And this is dusted with flour also.
They're not done yet, though.
And so as they get done, they will be
This is the part.
rolled on the gnocchi paddle. So what's going to happen here? My daughter's going to do this nice and slow.
Kind of failed on doing it.
All right, so what she's going to do is that she's going to use her thumb and push down, and then she's going to roll. And it's going to make a little shell, and it has texture on the backside. So, like I said, she makes this look quite easy because she's done this a lot of times.
Did it last night.
And she did it last night. However, it takes a little bit of practice. If you push too hard, it pushes the dough right into the gnocchi paddle and it gets quite sticky. So again, when you're making your dough, it's best to try to get your dough to be springy. So you want it to have, you know, some bounce back to it, but you want it to be dry at the same time so that it's not sticky to the counter, but it's not overly dry. You don't want it hard or crumbly. And it makes for perfect little shells. So these little guys now will go into boiling water. They can sit here for, you know, the time that we need, 20 minutes or so. It's nice to have these done at the same time as the veggies are coming out of the oven, so everything goes together. You can easily reheat everything later on in a fry pan or in the oven. That's great. This is great for leftovers. But when we do this fresh, it goes directly from the cooked pasta to the roasted veggies into a bowl, mixed together. We usually do some pine nuts or some other types of nuts, but we'll get to that in a minute. So you take these little guys, and if you do make a mistake, you just roll it back up like my son did. And then he just rolls them in.
That one isn't very good.
That's okay. So then he just rolls them in like that. And they're perfect. So practice makes perfect. So the more you do this, the better you get. But any which shape works out great. So we'll continue making all of this pasta into these guys, and then we'll be boiling them off and putting them in with the veggies. Okay, so the kids are making the pasta, and I'm gonna make some cashew cream. So we're gonna have the roasted veggies with a dollop of cashew cream on top. So the cashew cream that we're gonna make, a lot of times I'll make it for flavor with nutritional yeast, but we're trying some other flavors that we really are seeming to enjoy. And today I'm gonna put, with our cashews, I'm gonna put tamari. So it's gonna be a salty, garlicky tamari dressing that my daughter is loving right now. So gonna be using some soaked cashews into the Vitamix, and I've probably got around 2.5 cups here. I am going to put in a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to put in a clove of garlic, and probably put in 3 or 4 tablespoons of tamari. And then I'm going to add a couple of more tablespoons of water just to make sure that there's some liquid in there. So now we've got a bunch of mass in the Vitamix, ready to go. I'm gonna get the lid on, and we are going to now turn the Vitamix on to 2 or 3, and you can see quite quickly it starts to become a bit of a mass. So I'm going to turn that off, and I'm going to scrape down the sides. And you can see it's quite dense. This is where the extra water comes in. But we want it to be quite a bit of a paste when we're done. So we're at 6 or 7 here. And depending on the cashews and how soaked they are and how much moisture they're holding is how much water you'll need. So I'm going to add in a little bit more water just so it's all going to catch. And now we're going to crank that right up. I'm going to let that go for probably, all in all, 2 minutes. As it starts to get really creamy. Okay, so now I've got it creamed up. What you want to do is cream it to a point where you have no chunks left, and it gets just finer and finer as you go. So I luckily have a professional taster in our household who loves cashew cream and is a connoisseur when it comes to cashew cream. And so she will always tell me what it needs.
Did you put lemon in there?
I didn't put any lemon. Does it need lemon? Yeah. Okay. So.
It's way too salty and not enough lemon.
Okay, so a little bit of lemon is going to be the next thing. So I'm going to add some lemon, and then.
More blending, chunks.
And she says it needs more blending. So one more step here. Some lemon, 1 whole lemon that we squeezed, and I blended a little bit more to get some of the little fine chunks out. Lemon. Good. Does that pass? Excellent. Okay, so 1 whole lemon squeezed, 3 or 4 tablespoons of tamari, 2 to 3 cups of soaked cashews, 1 teaspoon of salt. You can also put a little bit of chili in there. You could put, a little bit of anything else that you want in there, maybe some mustard even. And that's what it ends up looking like when it's done. You've got a nice, it could be thicker than that too. The lemon, when I put it in, it was quite thick. That thinned it a little bit.
Lemony and salty, if that's...
Yeah, that's sweet. It all depends on what you like when the flavor is done. So that can go, a dollop of that onto many different things, sandwiches as a spread, onto pasta. We'll put that in the fridge and use it several times. All right, checking in with these guys. They're doing an awesome job. They've only got 2 pieces of dough left. More hands make for faster work. So if you do have 4 or 5 that can do this, this actually comes together really, really quickly. These guys have been working on this sheet for probably 15 minutes, and they've got probably 10 more minutes left to go. And I'm gonna start getting some water on to boil and check our veggies. Okay, checking the veg. Let's see how things are going. They sound great. Everything's sizzling away. Starting to just turn. You can see on the edge of everything there, everything's just starting to cook just beautifully. You can smell them too. Everything's starting to smell nice and sweet. It smells a little bit like Thanksgiving dinner. So they're cooking away. We'll give them another probably 10 or 15 minutes as we finish the pasta and get the water boiling. Okay, so these guys just came out of the oven and just making sure they're nice and soft. They're really well cooked. Starting to brown just a tiny bit. A lot of the sugars being developed.
They look so good.
And so these are going to cool just for a few minutes, just so they're not crazy piping hot. Once we over here cook our pasta, that's all ready to go into the bowl. So a few more minutes and we're going to be eating lunch. Okay, so you get yourself some boiling water. We start scooping the pasta into the pot. Probably for this much pasta, we're going to cook this in 2 batches. So we'll put in half of the pasta now, cook that. That'll be enough to feed everybody now. And then we'll cook the second half, or, yeah, 1 more scoop. Or you could then freeze this. Freeze it as it is.
Good.
And have it fresh pasta ready to go in the freezer. All right, so having a spider, that's what this guy here is called, is really handy. It's a really super handy tool for pasta. Because a pasta fork, like a regular pasta tong, I guess, for pulling out these guys, isn't that easy. This is the best way to do it. Okay, so what we're gonna do, got all those guys. Then we're gonna crank the water back up. And we're gonna put the rest of these guys in. Get the second batch cooking. And we're gonna put in our roasted veg. Can you bring the bowls over? Okay, then we're gonna mix the pasta and the veggies. Then we're gonna serve that up, like so. So we've got the little cavatellis all mixed in there with the roasted veggies. And then we've got a little dollop of cashew cream on top. And then
I thought that one was mine. That's mine. Oh, okay.
now we've got Happy Kids eating the pasta.
I'd even more unhappy.
So, how is it?
I only tried the Cavatelli.
It's so good.
And so far it's really good.
All right.
But I'm still mixing it up.
So, if you were to make this better, what would you put in it?
Me?
Yeah.
Nothing.
No? You think it's perfect the way it is?
Sometimes we'd have pesto, but I think it's thicker.
Yeah. Yeah. Pesto. Maybe a bit of tomato sauce sometimes. No?
It's good like this.
You like it like that?
Yeah.
All right. So a really fun dish for everybody to make together. The cavatelli, chopping veggies, roasting. You know, all in all, this probably takes an hour to bring it all together. But this here, and we've got lots left over, is going to go into the fridge. And we're going to have this as a 5-minute meal a couple of times this week. And this can be a side. We could do a big Caesar salad or a big green salad, and this could be a small side, or as these guys are having right now, it's a main meal. All right, well, I hope that everybody enjoyed that. We covered over the tamari cashew cream, the cavatelli, potato, beet, and carrot salad-y pasta. So if anybody has any questions, please let us know, and I hope that this works out for you. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.